how important was it for you to write this book about Larry Doby? Why was it so important?
It's a good question, and I'm going to give you a good answer. I've written 15 books. They're pretty good, most of them, but only 2 of them I had to write. One was a book before this, which was called Baseball, Nazis, and Newark's Hot Dogs, Growing Up Jewish in 1930 in Newark. That was my first 21 years of my life with my dad, who had been a professional baseball player. And it meant a lot to me. I wanted to get a lot of emotion out of myself. This one, Larry and I were friends for 35 years. And I'll tell you quickly that Larry Jr. was very helpful in this. And he was helpful. I asked him why. Because I reached out to him because I said, I don't know anything about the Doby family in South Carolina. How am I going to? He said, listen, my dad had a very hard life. But one thing, he didn't trust many people at all. He trusted you completely. And that's why whatever help you need on this book, I'll give you.
That's a great compliment.
It is a compliment. Unfortunately, he's not here for me to thank him. One other thing about why I wrote the book, if you're interested in this.
Yeah.
My 3 closest friends in the world, other than my wife, of course, are my kids. Muhammad Ali, Larry Doby, Monte Irvin. When I decided to write this book, Larry didn't know it. By then, he was gone. And I mentioned it once to Monte, and about 6, 8 months went by, and we were at an occasion together. He said, how's the book coming? I said, well, Monte, honestly, I just haven't had it. He said, listen, let me tell you 2 things. One is you can't die. And number 2 is the reason, because you're the last guy who saw us play for the Newark Eagles in a black league. And when the kids today say, oh, you never had a league, you always write a little bit here, a little bit there, and you keep us alive. Rupert Stadium was owned by the New York Yankees. The Newark Bears were voted the greatest minor league team in history. No contest. When the Bears went on the road, the Newark Eagles of the Negro Leagues came in and played. I knew when I was 9 or 10 how to sneak into that ballpark. And I set the indoor armory record for truancy as a 6th and 7th grader. I figured I could learn more in the ballpark than in Miss Becker's class, and I did learn more. But I remember there were days when I saw the Eagles finally and realized they were a Newark team. I would go back and say, it's baseball. My old man taught me baseball, and I loved it. So there were many times I was the only white kid in short pants sitting in that ballpark, and the fans were so nice to me.
Wow, that's amazing.
Baseball is baseball.
That's amazing. That's amazing. Speaking of those Newark Eagles, I consider it one of the highlights of my career to have interviewed Monte Irvin.
Monte, when he died, he was living in assisted living in Houston.
Mm-hmm.
I think his daughter was going there a lot. And he left a note for his daughter, and he left it there for many days. And it said, if I should pass away during the night, please call Jerry in the morning. So Monte and Larry and Muhammad, who never knew either one of them.
Yeah.
It was an interesting quartet.
Yeah.
The first chapter of this book is called Cleveland Ain't Brooklyn.
Yes, I saw that, yeah.
They knew who Jackie was. They saw him in the supermarket. They saw him in the drugstore. And they saw Rachel pushing the baby carriage. They lived there. He had to go to Cleveland. He went to a segregated town. Segregated high schools. People don't know this. Segregated hotels segregated everywhere, but segregated hospital.
Wow.
And a big amusement park that they were banned from. And so he had the first chapter is called Cleveland Ain't Brooklyn. And that's the whole story about why he fell through the cracks. I have my own theory about that, but also because I think in many ways, with no disrespect to Jackie, that he had it tougher. And Larry knew it because he said to me one day, listen, I don't know why people think there's no jealousy between me and Jackie. There's no animosity. He said, people don't know that first year we talked every night on the phone. How are we going to survive this? So we were friends from the beginning. He said, but he took a lot of crap before I came even arrived on the scene.
Yeah.
And for that, he gets credit and he deserves it. But Jerry said, I'm going to tell you something else. Nobody ever said, well, that's okay. We'll be nice to the next Negro that comes along, except he didn't say Negro.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow. Let me ask you one follow-up to the Newark Eagles. And you look at that roster, Leon Day, Monte Irvin, Larry Doby. I think Don Newcomb was on the team the year after. I don't know if he was on.
He never played with Nuke, but although he was in the Pacific then in the Navy.
Yeah. But just talk about the talent on that team: Leon Day, Monte Irving, Larry Doby. Who is the catcher? Also another
Biz
Mackey. Just talk about the talent on that team.
I'll tell you a story about Leon Day. Leon Day had a reputation as the fiercest competitor in black baseball. Now, a lot of guys in the Negro American League, that was the Monarchs and those guys, they were a weaker league, and so they didn't see they didn't see him that much. But Leon was fierce. Now, Leon and Monty roomed together briefly, and that year they went together to Puerto Rico to play on separate teams. Leon is playing, I don't know, for Caguas, but I know that I think Monty's playing for San Juan. Now they're going to go back to spring training with the Eagles, last game of their shortened season. And Monty's playing again. Leon is pitching. Now, when Leon got on the mound, you could say anything you wanted that could make him laugh. You couldn't make him laugh. He looked like a storm cloud looking for a place to land. And that's the way he pitched.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Monty gets up, he gives Leon this, hi, how you doing? Everything's great. We'll be in a plane tonight flying back to, and Leon goes, The first pitch, Monty's in the dirt. Leon's up on his elbow. I mean, Monty's up on his elbow. Yeah, what the hell is wrong with you? We were roommates and we might be roommates. You go, what, are you crazy? What's wrong with you? And besides, I ain't hitting but 256. And Leon yells back, and you ain't hitting 257 leaving this park. Now, how good a competitor could Leon Day have made the majors? Oh, true story, because it'll all be true stories. And stories nobody else ever heard. Okay.
Yeah.
He's dying in the hospital in Baltimore. Max Manning, the number 3 pitcher on that team, number 2 pitcher, I'm sorry, goes to see him and say goodbye. But he's going to die by the end of the week or 10 days. So they're talking. And while they're talking, in comes a nurse. She's got a baseball in one hand, and with the other hand, she's guiding a white guy who wants to talk to him. And she says, Mr. Day, I didn't mean to interrupt you two guys, but this fellow is from the Baltimore Sun, and he really needs to speak to you. So Leon looks over and can't imagine why. He says, nice to meet you. And the guy says, listen, Mr. Day, it's my honor and privilege to tell you, today you were elected to the Baseball Hall of Fame. And he looks at him and he says, well, that's nice. And then he looks at Max and he winks. And then he looks back and he smiles probably. And then he looks back at the white guy and he says, well, thank you. And the white guy says, I got to ask you a question, and please don't be offended, but I got to ask you as a newspaper guy, does this make up for never playing in the big leagues? Leon looks at him and says, young man, you have been grossly misinformed. I played in the big leagues most of my career. I don't know whether those white boys could have played in ours. That was Leon Day. Now, one other thing I'll tell you about Leon, and this stuff is in the book too, some of it. Leon never missed a game, or hardly ever. Now, the year that they won the Negro League World Series, he was 17-3, something like that. That sounds pretty good, but it would have been much higher if they had a longer season. They had a very short season, and what made it even shorter was it played in 2 halves, And the Eagles won both halves, so there was nobody with him to play in the playoffs. So he missed a number of games.
Yeah.
But he didn't miss him. He was either at second base or in the outfield because I don't know. I would guess his lifetime average is clearly in 320, somewhere in there. But there were seasons when he hit 350. They couldn't afford to bench Leon. These guys are interesting. You know, Monte Irvin, you mentioned him, on a team you never heard of, the Patterson Smart Set.
Wow.
The Smart Set was a black social club all around the country. And Patterson was very proud of it, or it sponsored a baseball team. The shortstop was Monte Irvin. The second baseman was Larry Doby. Larry Doby was a high school sophomore when he played on that team. So he knew Monte before he got to the Eagles. Well, Abe Manley, who was the co-owner of the Eagles, and he didn't want to do the front office business, the money, the contract. That was up to Effa, and she loved it. She reveled in it. He just wanted to drive around to black ghettos where he saw semi-pro teams play and say, I like that guy. Go see my manager tomorrow and tell him I'm signing you tonight to a contract. That's where he got his biggest thrill out of. So he signs Monte that way off the Smart Set. And Monte shows up. I don't know, he might have even been wearing a Smart Set uniform. And the manager is Willie Wells, a great, great unsung, well, not among blacks, shortstop. And he says, what are you doing here? What is that funny? Why are you here? He said, well, Mr. Manley signed me last night. He said, come see you. Oh, okay. He was used to that. He said, what position you play? Monte says, shortstop. He says, young man, there's only one shortstop on this team, and you're talking to him. So you see all that green out there? Go find a position. And that's why he came to the majors as an outfielder. Now, you got to understand something here. This is supposed to be sanctimonious, so I'm going to make it sanctimonious. I don't give too much credit to Branch Rickey for anything. What he did was he told me, you won't play with a black guy, I'll trade the guys, whatever it is. He gave Jackie a friendly locker room. The first three blacks he signed, Fancy Dan Bankhead, Jackie Robinson, and Don Newcomb. You know the total amount of money he paid for their contracts? Nothing.
Really?
He just took them. Now, there's a story behind that because Jackie Robinson was not supposed to be the first Negro in the big leagues. It was supposed to be Monte Irvin. Monte could do everything. And so could Jackie, but Monte could much more so. And all the black players would tell me later on, we thought it'd be Monte. Larry tells me this story 2 days before his induction into the Hall of Fame. I said, what are you going to talk about tomorrow night? It's the induction. He said, I'm having a little trouble. He spoke for 6 minutes and 12 seconds. I clocked it. Greatest short speech I have ever heard in my entire life. In the speech, he says, a lot of people think baseball hasn't come far enough. We don't have a black manager, and he was one of the two candidates who lost, he and Frank Robinson. We don't have a black manager. We don't have blacks in the front office. Jackie's hollering about that all the time. And he said, I think you people need to know you're wrong. We've got a lot of black players playing, and we will have a black manager. But compare where baseball is today because of that to where America is today. I vote for baseball. And then he tells them the story of Steve Gromek Sr., goes the distance. He's a 5-inning, 6-inning pitcher, a journeyman, but a good pitcher. But he's a bottom guy in the rotation, but they're winning. They're playing the Boston Braves, 1948 World Series. Cleveland hasn't had a pennant for 28 years, never mind a World Series championship. And Gromek is inspired. He gives them 9 good innings. And Larry Doby gives him 1 important home run. And they win the game together. The Cleveland Plain Dealer photographer says, hey, Doby, go over there I want to take a picture of you guys together. Well, as Doby many times told me, it wasn't symbolic. It became, he said, but it wasn't. It was 2 guys who had no color, enjoying the greatest moment of their career. And they got their arms around each other, and it looks like Doby's going to kiss him. That picture shows up on the front page all over the South. When did you see a black and a white hugging in the front page in 1948? Well, years went by, and a congressman named Pasquale initiates legislation to get Larry the gold congressional citizen medal. The front's always the same. The back you choose. He calls up Gromek's son. So when this idea of the medal comes up, Larry Jr. wants that picture on the back of the medal. And so do the Gromeks. They sign releases. And that's what's on the back of that medal. That's what he referred to. He referred to that picture that was taken. And both families said the picture was in the father's den. They passed it by all the time. His glove was there, a ball was there, you know. But one day when they got to be old enough, by that, Gromek was the same as, he had some static for what hugging Larry. And he was the same as Larry was when it came to sparing his kids, stuff like that. Junior didn't know anything. Well, he knew, he heard, he listened, he eavesdropped, but he really didn't know how bad it was for his father until he was actually playing baseball himself. And the father, okay, now I'll tell you. Because when the old days, he'd say, tell me about it. I want to know what happened. He'd say, it's history. Go Google it. You'll find out. Go Google it. And so as a result of that, they were raised the same way. And about the same age, they realized this picture was history. It wasn't baseball history. It was American history. It was journalism history. It was, I mean, it means so much. And Larry told me, unlike Steve, Larry said that picture was my secret, and my wife, Helen. I had it with me all the time because things didn't get better overnight because everybody decided to be okay.
Right.
I had a lot of problems, and I looked at that picture, and they went away.
Wow, that's great.
Gromek Jr., he's the one that got the static. He lived in Hamtramck, Michigan, small town. Everybody knew everybody. He comes back. He's a World Series hero, right? He had a friend. He played Little League, American Legion, high school baseball with him. All he owns a bar now. So he goes into the bar to see him, and the guy walks right by him. And one of the regulars, he says, what's the matter with you? He said, the picture. Now Steve gets his anger up. He goes over and says, what's wrong with you? And the guy says, well, you could have shook his hand. You didn't have to almost kiss him. He told the guy off. They lived in the same town till eventually they all began to move. And he never spoke another word to the guy.
Wow. Let me ask you about another home run you wrote about, and I've heard you talk about it too, was when they told Larry he was getting called up, right? And he hit the home run to end in the first game of the doubleheader. Tell that story. It's such a great story.
Well, Larry played a night game in Wilmington, Delaware. So that means he parked his car at Rupert Stadium where they all assembled. That was a big ballpark. Got on a bus, went down there, played a night game. It's a trip to Wilmington. Came back to the stadium, picked up his car, drove his car back to Patterson, crawls into bed about 3:45. The phone rings, and it's Effa Manley. I'm really sorry to wake you up. He said, yeah, Miss Manley, I'm really tired. He said, well, I have to tell you this now. I sold your contract to the Cleveland Indians. Is that okay with you? And she said, here's what I want you to do. We're going to be in for a hard time. She knew. She was the only one in that league that knew that was the end of the league.
Yeah.
Because they stole players and didn't pay for them. Right. And they were players that they had developed. And now black fans were saving their money to travel to National League cities to see Jackie, to travel to America to see Doby, and she saw it coming. So anyway, she says, we want you to play the first game. And then got a little present for you. We'll give it to you in the locker room. And then there's a gentleman here named Lou Jones who's going to accompany you on the train to Chicago. Of course, they were playing on the road. Well, his last at bat, he hit. I can see that stadium. I sneaked into many, many times, and I can see the Wolf's Head oil sign up there over the right field fence, and there it went. Last at bat as an Eagle. Who's going to believe this crap, right? He's trotting around the bases, and I'm thinking, I don't know. I wasn't there, but I'm in reconstructing. I don't know what he was thinking. Was he scared? Was he nervous? Was he said, that'll show everybody I can play? I don't know what it was. The whole team, of course, is out there to greet him, but more so with more vigor than usual because they know he's leaving.
Yeah.
And I remember in the book I said he wasn't running toward home plate. He was running toward history, and he knew it. But the way it turned out when he got to history, it was a lot tougher and a lot more negative than he dreamed it could be.
Putting up the numbers that he puts up under those circumstances, right? I mean, if you really, and I know you've talked about that, just comment on that. This is not, going to the ballpark under normal circumstances. Just talk about how difficult it was and how much more that magnifies his accomplishments.
Well, I had an argument about this, trying to get him in the Hall of Fame originally. And, baseball writers are creatures of habit. They should all have large briefcases like lawyers have so they can carry their decimal points around in them because that's how they see the game. I couldn't last as long if they saw it the way what I think about the game. But I'm arguing with a guy who I respect, the guy, a good guy. I'm not going to mention his name. He says, Jerry, you just don't get the Hall of Fame. He hasn't got the numbers. I should tell you what. Suppose I give you Babe Ruth, I give you Chris Speaker, I give you Ty Cobb. I'll give them to you. Tell me what their statistics would have been if they were in fear of death every day. But more than that, their wife was getting the phone calls. Their children were getting the phone calls. Tell me what their statistics would be. He said, different topic, different subject. It's wrong. The guy had really just plain tough times, and he survived it all. And he was just, he played on a black baseball team at Great Lakes Naval Training Station when he was drafted into the Navy. Before he was sent to the Pacific. He was supposed to be in the invasion group that was going to invade Japan. That's why they're in this little. They were stocking up all these ships in that little alcove bay to keep them here for the big push. And the atomic bomb went off, and that was the end of that. And that's where he met Mickey Vernon. Okay. Mickey Vernon was the best ball player Clark Griffith ever had. And probably the most underpaid he ever had, too, because Clark Griffith was very good at that. He and Doby get stationed together on an atoll. And they're part of this task force that's going to invade Japan. And the Seabees come in. They were the construction battalion of the, I guess they were the Army Seabees, Navy or whatever. And they build an airplane strip. And then they build there's a lot of land left over. So they build a baseball park, a field you can play anything on. You can play a hopscotch on it. Mm-hmm. And Vernon, who was a major leaguer, and he knew about that Doby had been a black leaguer, let's form two baseball teams and play each other, which they did. Larry hit so many balls into the ocean that if Washington had signed him, Griffith probably would have charged him for all the balls he lost. Vernon writes a letter to his boss. Now, think about this. He risked his career with this. Because you got to know, if you read the book, you'll find out about the secret meeting in Meeting Room O in the Roosevelt Hotel where they decided we're going to keep blacks out no matter what. He was risking his career. He wrote a letter. Mr. Griffith, I found a guy who's going to give us more power. He's a black guy, but you really should sign him. Blah, 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 blah. Griffith writes back, I will run this team, and you'll play first base for me. And those were our jobs. You do your job. Let me do mine. I'll never sign him.
Wow.
And when Larry, at the end of the war, Larry's going back to join the Eagles one more time. He got a gift, this huge gift. It's specially made bats for him by the Louisville Slugger Company, paid for by Vernon.
That's great. That's
And
great.
later, they actually became teammates.